He'd been delivering food around Seattle for 5 years, navigating traffic on his motorcycle, dropping off meals with a friendly smile, always getting good tips for being fast and professional. Just a guy in his early 40s wearing a delivery backpack, doing honest work that kept him moving and independent, until he witnessed a devastating car crash on Interstate 5 during rush hour, and in the critical minutes before paramedics could reach the scene through gridlock traffic, everyone discovered that their friendly delivery driver wasn't just good at finding addresses. He was a former Army combat medic who had spent 4 tours treating trauma in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he still knew exactly what to do when lives hung in the balance and every second counted. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of instinct training and the continuation of a healing mission, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today, and if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who never stop saving lives. Alex Rodriguez strapped on his delivery backpack at 4:30 p.m., beginning the dinner shift that had been his routine for 5 years. At 42 years old, Alex had found work that suited him perfectly. Food delivery gave him independence, physical activity, decent income, and most importantly, it kept him moving. Never stationary for too long, never dwelling on things he couldn't change, always focused on the next delivery, the next customer, the next task. His motorcycle, a reliable Honda that he maintained meticulously, was his office and sanctuary. Seattle traffic didn't bother him the way it bothered car drivers. He could navigate through congestion, find alternative routes, and get meals delivered hot and on time when others would be stuck in gridlock. Customers appreciated his reliability, restaurants trusted his professionalism, and the delivery app consistently rated him in their top tier. What nobody knew was that before Alex Rodriguez became a food delivery driver in Seattle, he had been Sergeant Alex Rodriguez, United States Army 68W combat medic with the 10th Mountain Division. 4 deployments between 2008 and 2016, 3 to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq. 4 years of treating battlefield trauma, performing emergency medicine under fire, making split-second decisions about triage when casualties outnumbered resources, and living with the constant awareness that his medical skills were the difference between soldiers living or dying. Alex had left the Army 6 years ago, struggling with PTSD and the accumulated trauma of watching too many people die despite his best efforts. The VA had offered therapy, medication, support groups, all helpful in their way, but what Alex needed most was to not be responsible for life-and-death decisions anymore. Food delivery gave him that escape. The stakes were low. Worst-case scenario, someone's dinner arrived cold. Nobody died if he was 5 minutes late. That Thursday evening started normally. Alex picked up orders from familiar restaurants, navigated familiar routes, made his deliveries with the friendly professionalism that earned him good ratings and tips. By 6:45 p.m., he was on Interstate 5 northbound, heading to a delivery in the University District, when traffic suddenly came to a complete stop. Alex weaved his motorcycle through stopped cars, a legal practice in Washington for motorcyclists during traffic jams. As he moved forward, he could see what had caused the stoppage: a 3-car collision about a quarter mile ahead. Emergency flashers, deployed airbags, significant damage to vehicles. Not unusual on I-5 during rush hour. But then Alex saw something that changed everything. One of the vehicles, a sedan that had been rear-ended and pushed into the center barrier, had a person slumped over the steering wheel, and the driver's window was spiderwebbed with cracks suggesting head impact. Another vehicle had a passenger side door crushed inward, and Alex could see someone in the passenger seat not moving. Traffic was completely stopped in both directions. Alex could hear sirens in the distance, but they weren't getting any closer. Gridlock meant emergency vehicles were stuck somewhere behind the accident, unable to reach the scene. People were standing around the crash site, some on phones calling 911, others just staring, nobody taking action. Alex felt his heart rate spike, not panic. The same physiological response that used to hit when casualties came into his aid station in Afghanistan. His combat medic training was automatically assessing the scene: multiple victims, unknown injuries, no medical support on site, emergency services delayed by traffic. This was exactly the kind of situation where the first few minutes determined outcomes. For 5 years, Alex had avoided situations that would trigger his medical training. He deliberately chosen work that had nothing to do with healthcare, emergencies, or life-and-death decisions. He'd wanted to be a regular civilian doing a simple job. But watching people stand around doing nothing while injured victims potentially bled out in their vehicles, Alex realized he couldn't ignore this. His training wouldn't let him. His oath, the one he'd taken when he became a medic, didn't end when he left the Army. Alex pulled his motorcycle onto the shoulder, parked it safely, and ran toward the crash site. As he approached, he was automatically doing what combat medics call a tactical field care assessment, identifying the most critical casualties, determining what interventions were needed immediately versus what could wait, calculating how to provide maximum benefit with limited resources. Is anyone here trained in first aid? Alex called out to the bystanders. A few people shook their heads. One woman said she knew CPR but wasn't sure what to do in this situation. Okay, I'm a trained medic. I need help from anyone willing. You. Alex pointed to a young man standing nearby. Call 911 if you haven't already and tell them we have at least 2 trauma victims, possible head injuries, and internal bleeding. Tell them we need ambulances and trauma teams standing by. Can you do that? The young man nodded and immediately got on his phone, grateful to have clear instructions. Alex moved to the first vehicle, the sedan, where the driver was slumped over the steering wheel. The door was jammed, but the window was broken. Alex carefully reached through, checking for a pulse at the carotid artery. Present, but weak and rapid. Signs of shock. The driver, a woman in her 50s, had significant head trauma from impacting the steering wheel before the airbag could fully deploy. Ma'am, can you hear me? My name is Alex. I'm a medic. I'm going to help you. No response, but she was breathing. Alex did a rapid trauma assessment through the window, checking for major bleeding, spinal stability, airway compromise. Someone get me something to stabilize her head. Alex called out. A bystander handed him a jacket. Alex carefully positioned it to prevent further neck movement without restricting her airway. What's your name? Alex pointed to the woman who had mentioned knowing CPR. Jennifer. Jennifer, I need you to monitor this patient. Keep her head stable like this. Talk to her. Try to keep her conscious. If she stops breathing or you can't find a pulse, yell immediately. Can you do that? Yes, I think so. You can do this. I'll check the others and come back. Alex moved quickly to the second vehicle where the passenger wasn't moving. This was worse. The passenger side door was crushed, and a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, was trapped in the seat, unconscious with significant visible trauma. Alex's combat medic training categorized this immediately: critical priority, possible internal injuries, compromised airway, need for immediate extraction but risk of spinal injury if moved incorrectly. In Afghanistan, this would be a red tag casualty requiring immediate evacuation to a surgical facility. But this wasn't Afghanistan, and Alex didn't have a surgical team standing by. He had his hands, his training, and whatever makeshift supplies he could gather from bystanders. The driver of this vehicle, the girl's father, was conscious but in shock, not fully processing what had happened. Is she okay? Is my daughter okay? Sir, I need you to stay calm. I'm a trained medic. I'm going to take care of her, but I need you to help me. What's her name? Emma. Her name is Emma. Okay. Emma. Alex called loudly, checking her responsiveness. No reaction. He checked her pulse, present but very weak. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. Alex could see she had significant trauma to her chest and side where the door had crushed inward. Sir, do you have a first aid kit in your car? Any blankets, towels, anything clean? The father scrambled to find materials. Alex used what was available: a car emergency kit that had basic supplies, shirts from people's gym bags, whatever he could improvise into medical equipment. Over the next 8 minutes, which felt like hours, Alex worked on both critical patients simultaneously, running between vehicles, directing bystanders in how to monitor vitals and provide support, using every technique he'd learned in 4 deployments to keep people alive when resources were limited and professional medical help was delayed. He controlled bleeding on Emma using pressure dressings improvised from T-shirts. He positioned the unconscious driver to prevent airway compromise while maintaining spinal precautions. He talked continuously to both patients, using the same calm, steady tone he'd used with wounded soldiers, projecting confidence even when the situations were desperate. Emma, I need you to stay with me. Help is coming. Your dad is right here. You're going to be okay. Even when he wasn't sure she would be okay, Alex knew that tone of voice mattered, that patients could often hear even when they couldn't respond. By the time the first paramedics finally reached the scene 12 minutes after the crash, Alex had stabilized both critical patients enough that they had a chance. He'd controlled bleeding, maintained airways, prevented shock from worsening, and provided the kind of immediate trauma care that determined whether someone lived long enough to reach a hospital. Who did this? The lead paramedic asked, looking at the improvised but effective medical interventions. I did, Alex said, stepping back to give the professionals room to work. former Army combat medic. Both patients are critical. The adult female has head trauma and suspected cervical spine injury. I've maintained C-spine precautions. The teenage girl has crush injuries to the chest and abdomen, possible internal bleeding. Airway was compromised but is currently stable. Both were in shock when I arrived. The paramedic stared at Alex for a moment, then nodded with respect. Good work. Your interventions probably saved their lives. We've got it from here. As the paramedics took over and additional ambulances arrived, Alex stepped back from the scene. His hands were shaking. They always did after high-stress medical situations, even back in the Army. He walked back to his motorcycle, sat on it without starting the engine, and tried to process what had just happened. For 5 years, he'd avoided anything that would trigger his combat medic training. He'd wanted to be just a regular delivery driver, not responsible for life and death. But today, that choice had been taken from him by circumstances, and he'd done what he'd been trained to do. He'd saved lives. Alex's phone buzzed. A delivery app notification. Where are you? Customer is waiting for their order. He looked at it and almost laughed, right? He still had someone's Thai food in his delivery backpack, now 40 minutes late. That seemed absurdly trivial after what had just happened. Over the next few days, the story spread through Seattle. Several bystanders had recorded parts of Alex's emergency response on their phones. One video showed him running between victims, directing bystanders, performing medical interventions with improvised materials, all with the kind of professional competence that clearly came from serious training. A local news station picked up the story. Food delivery driver saves lives using combat medic training. They found Alex through the delivery app and requested an interview. Alex initially declined, but the father of the teenage girl, Emma, reached out personally through social media. My daughter is alive because of you. The doctor said if you hadn't controlled her bleeding and stabilized her breathing in those first minutes, she wouldn't have made it to the hospital. Please, I need to thank you properly. They met at a coffee shop near the hospital where Emma was recovering. Her father, Tom, showed Alex photos of his daughter awake, stable, expected to make a full recovery. The trauma surgeon told me that whoever provided the initial care knew exactly what they were doing, Tom said. He said the interventions were combat medic-level trauma care, and that's the only reason Emma survived. I looked you up 4 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan? Alex nodded. 10th Mountain Division. Combat medic. Long time ago. Not that long if you remembered everything you needed to save my daughter's life. Why are you delivering food? Alex was quiet for a moment. Because after 4 years of watching people die despite my best efforts, I needed work where the stakes were lower, where nobody died if I made a mistake or couldn't do enough. Food delivery gave me that distance. But you couldn't ignore someone needing help. No. I tried for 5 years to avoid situations like this, but when it happened right in front of me, I couldn't just stand there. Tom reached across the table and shook Alex's hand. I'm grateful you couldn't. My daughter has her whole life ahead of her because you decided your oath still mattered. The conversation stayed with Alex for days. His oath, the commitment he'd made as a combat medic to preserve life, hadn't ended when he left the Army. He'd tried to set it aside to become someone who wasn't responsible for emergencies, but the training and the commitment were still part of who he was. 2 weeks after the accident, Alex received a call from Seattle Fire Department's Emergency Medical Services Division. They'd heard about the I-5 incident and wanted to talk to him about a position as an emergency medical responder, someone who could provide immediate care at accident scenes while paramedics were en route. We have a program where we train first responders to provide initial trauma care, the recruiter explained. Your combat medic background makes you overqualified, but we'd love to have someone with your experience. It's part-time, flexible hours, and you'd be helping people in exactly the kind of situations where those first few minutes matter. Alex thought about it for several days. Part of him wanted to decline, to go back to the simplicity of food delivery. But another part, the part that had spent 8 minutes on I-5 doing what he'd been trained to do, knew that he couldn't fully walk away from emergency medicine. He accepted a modified role. He'd continue doing food delivery as his primary work, but he'd also be on call as an emergency medical first responder for Seattle Fire. When accidents or medical emergencies occurred and response times were delayed, he could provide immediate care until paramedics arrived. It wasn't the constant pressure of military combat medicine, but it was a way to use his training when it mattered most. His first official call came 3 weeks into the program. Multi-vehicle accident on Highway 99, injuries reported, response time 8 minutes due to traffic. Alex was delivering food less than a mile away. He diverted immediately. When he arrived at the scene, it was familiar territory. chaos, injuries, people not sure what to do. But now Alex had official authorization, proper equipment in his motorcycle bags, and the confidence that he was doing what he'd been trained for. "Seattle Fire First Responder," he called out, moving toward the victims. "I'm a trained medic. Who needs help?" Over the following months, Alex found a balance. Most of his time was still spent delivering food, simple, low-stress work that kept him independent and moving. But when emergencies occurred and he was nearby, he could respond, provide critical care, and make those first minutes count. He wasn't a full-time medic anymore. He wasn't carrying the constant burden of military medicine. But he'd found a way to honor his training without being consumed by it, using his skills when they mattered, helping people in their most vulnerable moments, and then going back to his regular life. 6 months after the I-5 accident, Alex received an invitation to Emma's high school graduation. Tom had insisted he attend, saying his daughter wanted to thank him personally. At the ceremony, when Emma walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she paused and pointed to Alex in the audience. "That's the person who saved my life," she said into the microphone, departing from the standard script. "He was just delivering someone's dinner, but he stopped to help when nobody else knew what to do. Because of him, I'm here today." The audience applauded, and Alex felt uncomfortable with the attention. But he also felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense that his combat medic training, all those years of trauma and difficult decisions, had led to something meaningful, not just in war zones, but here at home, helping a teenager get to her graduation. After the ceremony, Emma approached Alex with her father. "I don't remember much about the accident," she said, "but I remember your voice. You kept telling me to stay with you. That help was coming, that I was going to be okay. Even when I couldn't respond, I could hear you. That voice is why I kept fighting." Alex felt emotion welling up that he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "You did the fighting," he said. "I just bought you time until the real help arrived." "You were the real help," Emma said, "and I'll never forget that." Alex Rodriguez still delivers food around Seattle. He still navigates traffic on his motorcycle, drops off meals with a friendly smile, gets good ratings for being fast and professional. Most of his customers have no idea that the person bringing their dinner is a decorated combat veteran who has saved more lives than most doctors. But now, when emergencies occur and someone needs immediate medical care, Alex is ready. Not as a full-time medic carrying the constant weight of life and death responsibility, but as someone who can step up when needed, use training earned in war zones to help people in their own city, and then return to his regular life. Because true service doesn't end with a discharge or a desire for simpler work. It continues in whatever form allows someone to use their training to help others. For Alex Rodriguez, that means delivering food most days and delivering life-saving care when circumstances demand it, honoring his oath as a combat medic without being consumed by the trauma that once drove him away from medicine. The stakes are different. The wounds are civilian, not combat. The pressure is occasional, not constant. But the mission remains the same: preserve life, provide care, be ready when those critical first minutes mean the difference between someone living or dying. So tell me, have you ever discovered that someone in a simple service job had life-saving expertise? A delivery driver, a worker, someone whose background explained their extraordinary response in an emergency? Share their story in the comments below, because these are the stories that matter. Veterans of battlefield medicine who never stopped healing, who found balanced ways to continue serving, who discovered that the oath to save lives doesn't end, it just adapts. If this story moved you, subscribe to The Human Stories for more accounts of quiet heroism and medics who continue their missions in unexpected ways. Until next time, remember that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear delivery backpacks and motorcycle helmets, and they're using skills earned saving soldiers to save civilians, ready to respond whenever someone needs help.